boards present, senior advocates of Nigeria, gentlemen of the bar, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the coordinator of the Rule of Law Development Foundation, I would like to welcome us all to the second session of today's event. Without further ado, next on our agenda is a panelist session themed Quantifying and Assessing the Criminal Justice Budget and its Impact on the Administration of Justice. To chair this session, we are honored to have in our midst the eminent Silk Chief KADO-ABUJA, SAN. A round of applause, please. Chief KADO-ABUJA, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and Commander of the Order of the Niger, is a public servant who has served twice as the Attorney General of the Federation and the Minister of Justice of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. His career reflects a blend of legal excellence, political service, and advocacy for constitutionalism. We are so glad to have you in our midst. You're welcome, sir. Our lead presenter is no other person than J.B. Daudu, SAN, the coordinator of the Rule of Law Development Foundation. He's a prominent and distinguished legal practitioner and a leading senior advocate of Nigeria with extensive experience and expertise in the legal practice. He's an advocate for the rule of law. He's the founder of the Rule of Law Development Foundation, and through this foundation, he has advocated for judicial independence, accountability, and reform in Nigeria's legal system. He's an active participant in the development of legal thought and practice in Nigeria, often contributing through seminars, conferences like this, and legal presentations. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for him.
Her name was earlier omitted. Without further ado, we would like to take the lead presenter. We would like to call on the lead presenter to give us his presentation.
I should give my own thoughts on the issue before JB makes his presentation, but I don't think that would be fair to him. JB, very kindly make your presentation, and I will comment as we go along. Thank you.
This is the first presentation for the conference, and the topic is Funding Justice in Nigeria, Quantifying and Assessing the Criminal Justice Sector Budget and its impact on the administration of justice in Nigeria. I will just go through it. Time is fast spent. It's all about how to get money to fund the critical justice sector infrastructure. But it's important to read the introduction so that those who are not initiated in criminal justice issues will be able to follow. Nigeria is a country with a population of about 200 million people. Unfortunately, there are millions among us that not only exhibit criminal tendencies, but actually perpetrate them. Such criminal conduct range from offenses such as assault, theft, fraud, rape, corruption in a general manner and special manners, to modern crimes such as cyber crimes, armed robbery, child and women trafficking, electoral offenses, offenses proceeding from cultism and ritual murders, trading in human parts, etc. There are many other offenses too numerous to identify or itemized here, but suffice to say that a large portion of Nigeria's population have fallen on the criminal path, essentially because of the emerging get-rich-quick syndrome. During the colonial era, that is between 1864 and 1960, Nigeria's population oscillated from about 20 to 45 million people due to the decimating effect of the civil business or evil business of slave trade. The British colonial masters factored both this low population and the regional structure of the nation into planning decisions. Made by them in the conception and construction of criminal justice infrastructure, such as the location of police stations, courts, forensic laboratories, hostels, prisons, now correctional services, etc. Between 1960 till date, notwithstanding the effects of the 1967 to 1970 Civil War, Nigeria's population has trebled from 50 million to about 200 million. There is an addition, this is in addition to the fact that the administrative structure of the country changed from region to states. And whereas in 1963, there were 4 regions, that is the North, East, West, and Midwest, the inception of military governance in 1966 brought about the creation of federal structure based on 12 states. This was later increased by successive military governments to 19, that's 1976, 30 in 1987, and 36 in 1991. The creation of states meant that crime fighting and control infrastructures, which were located in the nation's capital, Lagos, and the 4 regional headquarters, Ibadan, Enugu, Kaduna, and Benin City, became grossly insufficient and logistically impossible for the joint use by the new states that hitherto belonged to the same region. What appeared to be the saving grace later turned out to be an albatross. The colonial regions were structured on, the colonial regions had been structured on component provinces, and it was most of these provinces that emerged into states. Consequently, subsidiary infrastructure in those provinces were elevated to state headquarters. And I give an example, like the provincial police headquarters in Katsina became the police command for Katsina State. The same thing for courts and prison facilities. Another factor impacting on our discourse hearing is that the creation of states did not translate to a tangential increase in the construction of new facilities, meaning simply that because they created new states, new prison or correctional facilities were not constructed. This was brought about, this was occasioned by a serious flaw in our military and post-military constitutional organogram, which created a lopsided slant in favor of the federal government. The effect of this imbalance was that critical components of the criminal justice system, such as prisons and the police, were matters that were retained in the exclusive legislative list of the 1979 Constitution and 1999 Constitutions. The federal military government between 1967 and 1999 did not realize that they were effectively spread thin by monopolizing the crime-fighting capacity and the criminal justice machinery described above. What this means simply is that they refuse to energize the crime-fighting infrastructure for a variety of reasons. This short-sightedness arising from many other reasons, such as oversensitivity to and fear of illegal change of government, greatly affected the capability or capacity of government to respond to the needs of the criminal justice architecture and infrastructure, such as correctional services, crime labs, pretrial detention, and many other criminal justice measures. That is why today, with the sudden growth of our population to about 200 million, the criminal justice infrastructure and crime-fighting machinery are grossly inadequate. That is why it appears that criminals have taken over the turf. The ratio of police personnel to the population, as well as other indices, such as courts and correctional services, are grossly inadequate. The solution, which is the trust, of this discourse, is how to create functional facilities in this critical area, commensurate to the needs of the Nigerian society. What, therefore, is the solution? It will respectfully be submitted that the solution is a corruption-free funding. That is, the allocation of votes and an appropriation of funds that will effectively be used to improve these infrastructures that have been identified above. How will these much-needed funds get to the agencies that require them? This paper is about identifying the bottlenecks in the release of funds generated from taxpayers for the optimum use of these criminal justice agencies and for the ultimate benefit of Nigeria and Nigerians. The definition: funding the criminal justice infrastructure and institutions in Nigeria means ensuring that activities such as investigation, prosecution, courts, custodial and non-custodial services receive predictable, adequate, transparent, and corruption-free resources so that they can discharge their statutory responsibilities, thereby protecting rights, delivering timely justice, and rehabilitating offenders. According to the Federal Ministry of Justice Annual Report 2023, this process involves both recurrent and capital expenditure aimed at strengthening institutions that uphold law and order. Funding criminal justice is about giving the relevant institutions the financial means not just to operate, but to do so with dignity, fairness, and efficiency. In Nigeria, this means that courts, prosecutors, custodial prisons systems, and non-custodial probation community services programs must receive adequate funding so that when a person is arrested, prosecuted, detained, convicted, and rehabilitated, the system works in a way that will achieve the desired result, which respects not only achieves the desired result, but which respects human rights, upholds the rule of law, and restores dignity. When funding is patchy or grossly inadequate, the effect is that people sit for years awaiting trial. Custodial centers become overcrowded, and nutrition-deficient meals are prepared at subsistence level or worse, in unhygienic conditions. and that this become the order of the day. Lack of funds also make rehabilitation programs to falter, leading to an erosion of public confidence. That much the minister emphasized. For example, one report found that as of December 2023, the daily feeding allowance for an inmate in Nigeria, in the Nigerian Custodial Center, was 750 naira for the whole day. And to the chagrin of Nigerians, the service admitted that their service security dogs were better fed at 800 naira per day. This kind of information created a serious backlash then against the service. Next point is who controls the money? Historically, the justice sector's financial framework was centralized with both the Federal Ministry of Justice and the Minister of Interior controlling key allocations. However, recent reforms, particularly with the advent of the Constitution 5th Alteration Act number 6 of 2023, now empowers states to participate actively in financing correctional institutions, making a positive shift towards fiscal decentralization. Let me just explain at this point without reading my notes, which is that before 2023, all the load was on the federal government, the executive arm of government of the federation, to bear the burden of correctional centers. The statistics that are provided in this write-up shows that even between 2023 and now, the state governments have been enabled to construct their custodial and non-custodial centers. It is clear that, and I mentioned it here, that state governments are really not keen on expending their funds on such ventures. I postulated somewhere that they are more interested in awarding contracts for capital projects other than engage in these social service functions. So it will take time to encourage them, because it is indeed their magistrate courts, their area courts, their customary courts and Sharia courts that send the bulk of those awaiting trial prisoners to the correctional services. And so it's just 2 years, it is early days. I hear that Akwa Ibom and Lagos are in the process or in the course of building their own correctional services. I hope other states will borrow a leaf. We have traced the money trail. That is how board bills are presented from the Federal Executive Council, how it lands to the National Assembly, and how the money is released to the implementation agencies. And the same too for state governments through the same process of their Executive Council and appropriation by the Houses of Assembly. I've also traced the functions of the Federal Account Allocation Committee, FAC. The Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission, and their oversight and formula review, and the implications for justice funding for correctional and prosecution. I think the paper will be circulated, and since there are other experts, I do not want to unduly exhaust the talk. And I've conducted a case study, National Assembly against the 2025 budget lines affecting the criminal justice chain, corrections, correctional services, and prosecution. And we have examined in detail the per inmate feeding schedule. And it has been suggested that humanly, the figure that appears reasonable is about 2,500 naira a day for inmates, since they do their cooking themselves and they do not incur labor costs. Budget sources. We have described what the budget sources are, and we have dealt with what the correctional services actually need additional funding for. And apart from feeding and nutrition and daily rations that I have mentioned, healthcare, medical and mental health. Anytime you see people from prison, you see them with all sorts of skin irritations, scabies, and different kind of skin irritation from malnourishment, undernourishment. So the answer usually is that the budgetary provision for maintaining their health is not sufficient. Also, infrastructure repairs and decongestion, capital expenditure. Minister dwelt on it, and figures have been put forward. I think 7.2 billion was voted for repairs in 2025. But whether this amount has been released or not, I wish the minister was here to shed light on this. Other money-consuming areas is staffing, training, and welfare. And also security and logistics, vehicles, and ICT and surveillance. He explained one of the factors militating against the correctional services, jailbreaks and the rest of them. And to have security and logistics, CCTV cameras, and other paraphernalia of surveillance costs money. But as usual, we are told money is not always sufficient. They have rehabilitation and vocational training programs. That is the non-custodial alternative. Minister has dwelt extensively on it. I will not bother to repeat it. It is set out here. He has also suggested a non-custodial scale-up and special funding finances. That is through non-governmental agencies and other well-spirited institutions, just to ensure that the funding of the correctional services reach an optimal level. We have gone through the new laws and how much money would be needed to satisfy the correctional service. That's at page 13. In the 2025 proposed budget, or 2025 budget, proposed the sum of 183.6 billion, which was higher than previous years. But what we will realize is that 2 years ago, the value of the naira to the dollar had lowered the current value of the naira to the dollar. And assuming there is a marginal increment in the budgetary allocation, what it means is that if you are buying something for 10 naira in the correctional service in 2023, you are most likely to be buying it for 60 naira in 2025. In that case, will the budget reflect that? No, that is not the case. So the budgets and the allocations have not taken into consideration the astronomical increments due to the vagaries of inflation and due to the vagaries of the devaluation of the naira. A lot of facts and figures have been given here. So I'll conclude. You've had a very long day. And in conclusion, I said, funding justice in Nigeria is more than a fiscal fulfillment of righteousness. It is a moral and constitutional imperative. The effectiveness of our justice institutions, from the police to the courts and correctional services, rests squarely on how predictably, adequately, and transparently they are financed. Where budgets are insufficient or irregular, the very ideals of fairness, due process, and rehabilitation collapse under the weight of neglect. The 2023 constitutional reform, which devolved correctional responsibility to both federal and state governments, marks a defining step towards shared accountability and localized innovation. Yet this premise will only materialize when funding translates into humane conditions, professional integrity, absence of corrupt practices, and genuine reintegration for offenders. Ultimately, a truly operational correctional service is measured not only by adequate naira allocations, but by outcomes and the feedback of inmates who are rehabilitated, or the feedback of service officers who are motivated rather than demoralized. And the minister talked about one of the factors of motivation in that 52,000 correctional service employees who some had not been promoted for the past 10 years, so suddenly promoted. So this is the type of thing we are talking about service officers motivated rather than demoralized through extraneous factors in the consideration of promotions. And all this will command public confidence rather than cynicism. Sustainable investment in criminal justice is therefore an investment in national stability, human dignity, and the rule of law itself. It is only when justice is adequately funded that Nigeria can credibly claim to be both free and independent. Thank you very much.
We have a representative from Chief Judge of the High Court of the FCT, representing Honorable Justice Hussaini Baba Yusuf, Mr. Idbinedion. Kindly make your way to the front. A round of applause for him. We also have Mrs. Onayi Amina Lawal, a representative from Connected Development Code. Kindly make your way to the front. And Mr. Vada Kwaga, apologies if I didn't pronounce your name correctly, a public finance analyst. Mr. Vaya Kwaga, Mr. Vayala. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Jebi, please, may we give you another round of applause? Jebi is a man I love. He is so highly organized, very intelligent, very devoted. Jebi, may God bless you. Now, let me say a few words. Well, the advent of military rule was itself an act of corruption. When you kill those who hold power and take it, That's an extreme act of corruption. It was. Before military rule, we had manpower problems. When the British left in 1960, we had manpower problems. At the time the military struck in 1966, we were still having manpower problems. Those manpower problems were aggravated by the war. During the war, we created 12 states. Out of the existing 4 regions, we went from 4 regions to 12 states, further aggravating the manpower problems of the nation. We met the needs that arose by appointing unqualified people to fill those high offices. This is true. That is the beginning of Nigeria's problem of corruption. The appointment of unqualified people into high offices. We went from 12 states to 36. We have 774 local governments and area councils. Who are the people who man these offices? They are not so qualified. That is true. The boundaries of the states are rigid. If you come from Cross River, you cannot find a job in Akwa Ibom. Am I right? The boundaries of the states are rigid. Labor is not mobile. And when labor is not mobile, it aids corruption. Then we adopted a presidential system of government. The presidential system of government means that in the states, all power is vested in the governor. And at the federal level, all power is vested in the president. A presidential system is actually a dictatorship under the Constitution. The reason why nations adopt a presidential system of government vesting all power in one person is so that the power so vested can be used to bind the nation together. That is the essence of a presidential system of government. In the states, it is expected that the governors will use that power to bind the state together. But that is not what has happened. Instead, this extreme power has been used in aid of corruption. Please, my dear brothers and sisters, am I right? It's true. You can't question the governor. The states are such small units that are easily pocketed by the governors. They are so small. He can carry the state about in his pocket. Government business is conducted in cash. Am I lying? Am I? You're not answering. It's correct. That's why we have this problem of corruption. Power is vested in one man. The states are so small. They are easily pocketed. They have been pocketed. Now, because of this kind of arrangement, we move from one extreme of dictatorship to the other extreme of liberalism, which is actually corruption. With the result that the institutions for combating corruption are overwhelmed. They are overwhelmed. They can't cope. They are founded on the premise that the work that they have to do will be limited. That work is unlimited. The police cannot cope. The judiciary cannot cope. And this constant exposure to situations about which they are helpless renders them indifferent. We're becoming different. You go to court, a judge has 30 or 40 cases on his list. He can't cope. Please, we're all lawyers. Am I right? He can't cope. So this is how it came about that corruption overwhelmed us. The institutions for combating corruption, they are limited institutions expected to tackle overwhelming problems. Then, of course, as Jebi said, they are not funded. No matter how much we fund them, we have a responsibility ourselves to refrain from corruption. We must refrain. We lack discipline. We must refrain. We must correct ourselves. The laws are not self-enforcing. The laws require good people to enforce them. Why do we not have good people to enforce the laws? We are doing everything possible to deculturize the nation. Our educational system is faulty. If our objective was to destroy the nation, we couldn't do better than to give the kind of education that we're offering to our young. It doesn't equip them for life. It makes them proud and distant from the community. Our borders are open. We are not a self-reliant nation. Are we? No, we are not self-reliant. As long as the nation is not self-reliant, it will have an overwhelming problem of corruption. We must shut the borders. We just must shut the borders. And if we think that we are going to build this nation by enjoying the luxuries that the nations of the world have invented, we are making a mistake. We are going to build our country by making the sacrifices that those nations made to invent those luxuries that we are enjoying. If you step out there and look at our cars, just look at our cars, and you know that this nation is going nowhere. We have a misconception of globalization. We think that globalization means that we should open our borders for the goods of other nations. Please, I appeal to the government. If we shut our borders and compel Nigerians to do without those things that we do not produce, we must make sacrifices. If we don't make sacrifices, how are we going to get there? So, Jebi, let me not go on and on. This is my lamentation. Where is that the moderator? What do you call? Please, come forward. The young lady who was standing here. There is no shortage of ideas in this country. There is no shortage of prayer. For those of you who read the Bible, you remember the incident at the shores of the Red Sea when Moses was praying to the Lord, and the Lord drove him away. Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. In other words, you have prayed enough. Now take action. Nigeria has prayed enough. Have we not prayed enough? We should take action. Call the first discussant to come and say something.
Our first discussant is Mrs. Onai Amina Lawal. A round of applause, please.
Good afternoon, all. Permit me to stand on existing protocol. My name is Unai Amina Lawal, and I'm here today representing Connected Development. And the question before me today is, how can civil society organization effectively advocate for improved justice sector budgeting and expenditure monitoring? I know something about expenditure monitoring, because if you're familiar with codes work, you know that's what we do a lot. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of what we can do to monitor expenditures. And once you would realize that if expenditures can be monitored, then we can now advocate for increased budgeting. Am I communicating? So in code, we have a framework called Follow the Money. And what do we do with Follow the Money? It's simple. When a budget has been approved, we follow from the moment of release down to when where it has been spent for and how it is being utilized. But not just that, we also empower communities to give them the right information to hold governments accountable. We do so by maybe radio programs, speaking the language of the community members, telling them this money has been allocated to your community for A, B, and C. We're going to teach you how to ask governments, how to hold the government accountable. Are they doing what they promised to do with the money? How is the money being spent? Down to the bill of quantity. Sometimes we request for those documents. I wouldn't say that it is easy. It's not, but when we continue such form of empowerment, empowering community in terms of the justice sector, for instance, knowing how much has been budgeted and knowing what the money is meant for. And then we go down to the community and say, this money is meant for this, it's meant for the infrastructure in maybe the correctional center. It is your duty, it is your responsibility as a community member to ensure that this money is being spent as it has been promised. So not just that, we also have the norm track tool. Now this norm track tool is communities nominating projects in their community to ensure that, they nominate this project, talk about it as a government project that is probably abandoned, or maybe the quality is not up to standard. So what do? We use our digital tools to advocate and probably seek for documents that speak to what is meant to be built, if it's an infrastructure, what is meant to be built. And this NumTrack tool has been, in Kaduna State, yes, it was adopted. In Bauchi State as well, it was adopted. And because the government realized that it sort of bridged the gap between the government and the citizen. So in a nutshell, I strongly believe that if we want increase of budgets, we cannot do that without transparency and accountability. First, we need to be transparent as to what the money is being spent on, and then we also need to be accountable. There's so many documents that we might want access to speak to budget performance, for instance, and it is not available. It is not easily available. Sometimes we get told to go and come back, and we keep asking questions. So I feel if these documents are readily available to everyone that is interested to know how money is being spent, I think it's going to also encourage more civil society organizations to continue to advocate for increase of budgets. And yes, sorry, maybe just. So I spoke about community engagement. Now, engaging civil society as a third-party monitor, yes, that's another point I want to make. a third-party monitoring up from the point of the budget draft down to auditing. I think civil society should be encouraged to be part of the process, and not just as monitors, but also as consultants to what is best, what is the best practice as to how to bring both the community and the government on the same table so that we can have a transparent budget process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma, for your contribution. I'm aware we have the founder of Hope Behind Bars Foundation, Mrs. Funke Adeoye. A round of applause for her. She makes her way to the stage.
The coordinator, the Rule of Law Foundation, our mentor to several young lawyers here, J.B. Dauda, SAN, and senior members of the bar. Permit me to stand on existing protocols. So my name is Funke Adeoye. I don't know, for some reason, I've been omitted, but this is a conversation that it's very, very timely and also very, very important. And a lot has been said by the several senior colleagues that have been up here today. It's a conversation that is very critical to my organization, Hope Behind Bars Africa, because as a non-governmental organization, our work is to bridge the gap. We have seen a lot of challenges within the criminal justice system. Personally, I have lived the experience of what happens when the criminal justice system fails a citizen, which is why I do the work that I do. And a lot has been said already, but I will just share some insights within the short time that we have. I was actually told to prepare a presentation, so I have an entire presentation here, but I'll try to summarize it. My talk is on funding justice in Nigeria, quantifying and assessing the criminal justice budget and its impact on administration of justice in Nigeria. And I divided this into looking at the current funding landscape for justice institutions. A lot has been said already, but I'll just highlight a few things. Also, how the budget constraints affect operational effectiveness. And then I would look at best practices for addressing funding gaps. In 2025, so I have a few figures that I'm going to share. In 2025, the Senate approved about 124 billion for the Nigerian Police Trust Fund. And in 2023, it received only 57 billion naira. Now, prior to this, when we look at the police fund or the budget for police, we find that we had more recurrent funding than less capital funding. Now, today, a lot of conversation has gone on funding in correctional system or the correctional service, but not so much has been said about the police or the law enforcement agencies. And we know that many of the challenges that we find in the system start from the police. The number of awaiting trial inmates start from the supply side. And in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of efforts to address this. And one of the efforts recently is this increase in funding by 100%. And I think that's where the insight from the last speaker really comes in, because if we have this increase in funding, the question is who is tracking it, who is holding the agencies accountable, right? And then when you go deep down, we have all of this funding, we have this increase in funding, but then when you go deep down, you still find officers on the streets complaining, decrying the fact that they have less welfare provisions, and we still have a lot of bribery and corruption on the street. So the question is, who is tracking this funding? A lot was said about the NCOS, but I wanted to stress on a couple of things. The NCOS budget for 2025 was 183.6 billion. My organization, Hope Behind Bars Africa, we do a lot of work around rehabilitation and reformation of inmates. But I don't know if it would surprise us to know that in the budget for this year and in the budget for the past 5 years, there is no allocation for rehabilitation and reformation of inmates. So the question is, what are we doing if we say we have changed the name of the service from prison to correction, but there is actually no statutory allocation for reformation and rehabilitation of inmates. So basically what happens is organizations like maybe the Rule of Law Foundation, organizations like mine, other organizations, CSOs, NGOs are the ones that help to support the work of the government. But the question is, how far can we really go in addressing rehabilitation, reformation of inmates? A lot has also been said about the meals of the inmates. As at today, inmates feed on 1,125 naira per day. And if we think that is a good figure, we need to understand that inside this money, we have contractors' fees, we have procurement leakages, we have a whole lot. So at the end of the day, by the time we are separating the amount that goes to the inmates, it is way lesser than that allocated amount. Then, of course, the Legal Aid Council, I don't know if anybody from there is here, but you have conversations with the Legal Aid Council, National Human Rights Commission, and they always talk about being under-resourced. And also that when you engage, I think I was in an engagement with senior officers of the Nigerian Correctional Service early this year. I think about May or June, and they said they hadn't received the allocation for this year. So even when these funds are increased, the question is, are they getting their funds at the right time, or are they getting full allocation or partial allocation? The next thing I have here is how the budget constraints affect operational effectiveness. But I think that is something that we all know. We all know the challenges we have with awaiting trial inmates. We all know that in terms of policing, poor resourcing undermines investigative quality. It damages public trust as well. In terms of prosecution, the bodies like the ACJMC have the mandate to monitor what is going on in the justice system, but the question is, do they have enough in the budget to actually do that? I actually saw a report, I think it was last year, by Clean Foundation that said ACJMC had an allocation of 73 million. I don't know if that's for the federal level alone or for across the states. But the fact remains that the ACJMC, which is a body that is supposed to ensure the implementation of a very laudable legislation like ACJ, is also not properly resourced. And then when we go to the judiciary, again, I have the figures for the judiciary. In the past 1 year, there's been an increase, but the question is, why do we still have challenges with infrastructure within the judiciary? Why do we still have case backlogs and the likes? So I'm just going to go straight to the best practices for addressing funding gaps. And it's interesting because the first thing I have here is transparency and accountability, which I think the other discussants from code and budgets, they work basically on transparency and accountability, and they'll probably be the best to delve into that. But the point is, we keep talking about how our justice systems are under-resourced. But the question is, even for the little funds that go out, who is tracking it? Who is tracking the contracting? Who is tracking the implementation of the budget, right? I think it was the funds that were released through the Nigerian Police Trust Fund, that it was a budget that was released for 2024 in 2025. And the question is, when we have all those kind of systems, who is actually tracking it? So it's important that as stakeholders, we ensure, or we try to work towards the implementation of the Open Government Partnership Framework, which Nigeria is a party to. Nigeria has a national action plan on open government partnership. And what would it look like? Basically, as was mentioned, we need to publish the detailed budget. If possible, also introduce a specific open government partnership national action plan for the justice sector to ensure transparency and open contracting. And then something else that I'm still going to speak on is we need to enable more media monitoring and CSO monitoring through community reporting platforms, because this is really what is going to put the trust of the public in the justice system. Where, most of us here are lawyers today, but if you go to meet the average person on the street, they will tell you police is not your friend. They'll tell you they don't trust in the justice system. And why is that? It's because most of the things that we do around here is shrouded in secrecy, and it looks as if, no, it's just within us, and people don't really have access to these things. I also want to speak about public-private partnership, which I think is really, really critical. My organization currently is running a partnership alongside the European Union with the Nigerian Correctional Service. And what are we doing? We're trying to support the efforts of the NCOS in rehabilitation and reformation of inmates through farming. So as I speak to you, if you go to the prison farm center in Gwagalada, or you go to the Kirikiri Women facility, or you go to even Kuje prison, you would see specific farm projects that we have in these places. And what's the essence of this? The first essence is to keep them less idle. And the Honorable Minister already mentioned all the tremendous work that is going in terms of keeping them less idle. But the question is, other than keeping them less idle, can we turn our correctional facilities into income-generating facilities? We're talking about funding the correctional service. You know, if you go to the US, if you go to even Uganda, you find farm systems, farm institutions that are actually working. Even though, I mean, I have reservations about what is happening in the US because it's a different human rights issue on its own. But the point is, as we are looking to solutions outside, we should also look to solutions within. There is nothing that stops the Nigerian Correctional Service from addressing food insecurity in Nigeria. In Kaduna alone, Nigerian Correctional Service has over 1,800 hectares of farmland. In Ibadan, in Oyo State, in Ogbomoso, it has over 1,200 hectares of farmland. So the question is, why are we not inviting investors? Some of us here, I mean, some of our seniors here, I'm sure you have agri projects across the country. I always tell people that the best place to actually put your agri project is within the correctional service farms, because most times people are scared of insecurity, right? But we're saying bring your farms to, you know, the prison farm centers. And so I don't know if this is news for anyone, but in case you're just hearing it, please, Nigerian Correctional Service actually has farm centers across the country. I think more than about 18 working farm centers across the country. And also they allow you to have all these projects across the country. I know because we're in this partnership with them, and it was one of the easiest partnership that we ever had. So the question is, instead of looking outside, can we look inside and see how we can generate income, even while rehabilitating and reforming the inmates? So that's something that we can also look at. In terms of public-private partnership as well, I saw an interesting model with the Lagos State Security Trust Fund, which is also a public-private partnership-driven model, where they opened up a fund, or they opened up a pool of funds, and the government gets to pull into the funds, but also private individuals as well, companies, people who want to do CSR, they also get to pull into the funds. And this was created because for a very long time, they talked about the insecurity issues in Lagos State. The truth is, I also think that the government cannot do it alone. When you look at the criminal justice system, it's really the government, you know, the executive, the judiciary is in charge of the criminal justice system. But can we also look outside and begin to bring in private sector? And I think that no country can actually develop without the private sector. But we need to be more innovative in the way we bring the private sector into the justice system. We want to digitize the courts. We want to create case management systems. What happens to all the tech companies across the country, all the tech startups? Why are we not engaging them to see how they can also come support our justice delivery? If we don't preach this message to them, nobody is going to do it. Then the final thing, or the second to the final thing I'll be talking about, I think some conversations has already gone on that here, is first of all that currently Nigeria has some of the best criminal justice legislations. When you look at the ACJA, when you look at the Nigerian Correctional Service Act. But the question is, what's happening with implementation? So for instance, the Honorable Minister talked about the non-custodial system. One of the reasons why the non-custodial system is not being implemented is because in the Act, there is something called the Special Fund for Non-Custodial Measures that is established by the Act and is supposed to be managed by the National Committee on Non-Custodial Measures. It's there in the Act. It's also a fund that we can all find innovative ways to pull into, but that fund has not been set up. So for me, that's something we have to also look at. The fact that we have all these laudable legislations, but we have challenges with implementing them. There's currently the Nigerian Correctional Service Trust Fund Bill in the House. It's passed at the House. It's currently at the Senate since 2023. That's also a bill that we have to look at, not just passing, but ensuring that it's also implemented. Then I also want to speak briefly on the revised police regulations. Now, we all know that the Police Act was enacted in 2020. Also an amazing act that is supposed to help reform the police system. It's supposed to help encourage community policing, human rights within the police system. But as I speak to you, that act we cannot reap the fruits of that act because the act is currently being guided by regulations of 1946. And so, the police regulation has been revised. I think it has been at the Ministry of Justice for a while now, but for some reason, it has not been gazetted. These are all laws that, if they are properly implemented, if the gazetting is done, if they are properly enacted, we can actually, be able to address some of the funding gaps. And then finally, again, I have to speak about the media as justice watchdog. Currently, we're in a system where we don't necessarily have an independent media because a little investigation being done and people are being harassed. But if we allow our media to actually do their work as watchdog, if we allow them to actually do their work, their investigative work, their investigative reporting, and they put out these details, I think that we would be able to reap the fruits of democracy, because that's what democracy is all about. The media has a key role to play, and I'm talking about an independent media that is not bought by anybody. So that's something that we have to do as we also look to fund the justice system. Finally, I'll just reiterate again that Nigeria, I've practiced law for just about 13 years, and then I've done this work for a couple of years. But I know that even for the short time that I've done this work, we are not where we used to be. Our waiting trial inmates, we used to have about 70%, as at 7 years ago. When you look at the numbers today, we have about 66%. So it means that certain things we are doing is working, right? But maybe we have not started reaping the full gains. And I think that what is actually going to give us the full gains of what we want to see in our justice system are institutions that are strong, are policies that are strong, and policies that are properly implemented. So we need to go back again to our legislations. Ensure that we strengthen our legislations, ensure that we strengthen implementation of our legislations, and look for innovative ways, especially like looking at the private sector, looking at public-private partnership, and seeing how we can better fund our justice system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma, for that profound contribution. To give further insight into this issue, I'd like to call on the representative of the Chief Judge of the FCT, Mrs. Evu Ibinedion. She's the Executive Secretary of the Administration of Criminal Justice Monitoring Committee. A round of applause as she makes her way forward.
Good afternoon, learned Silks. I would like to seek the permission of the session chair, my most revered mentor, Chief Kano Agabin, SAN, to please adopt the already established protocols. Once again, I bring goodwill from the Honorable Chief Judge. I would like to thank again the coordinator of the Rule of Law Foundation for curating this very important discourse. Because I'm representing the Honorable Chief Judge, I will have to make reference to His Lordship's presentation, which has been handed to me to discuss. So permit me to go through as I take us through the topic, funding as it affects the judiciary. The previous speakers spoke about from accountability, following the money, to adequate budgeting across the criminal justice system, as well as the closing remarks of Mr. J.B. Daudu, mentioning that funding of the criminal justice system is a moral and constitutional imperative. So it's on that note that I lead us into this topic, as funding of the criminal justice system is often treated as a technical subject or budgeting exercise. It is not, it shouldn't be, that shouldn't be the case. It is actually a matter of rule of law, because if you look at the provisions of the Constitution, where provisions are made for fair hearing, presumption of innocence, timely trial, legal representation, and humane treatment in custody, and these issues, which are constitutionally provided for, are only as real as to the extent of the institutions that are charged to provide or deliver these duties. So if the courts are not able to conduct virtual proceedings, for instance, for want of enabling facilities, or when the correctional centers are overcrowded, largely due to insufficient resources. I was quite alarmed when the previous speaker mentioned that there was no budgetary allocation for rehabilitation. And then I'm wondering, just in 2019, the Nigerian prison service was, transitioned into Nigerian Correctional Service with the intention, or with the intent that the correctional service would tilt more into rehabilitation than punitive measures. So if we have that shift from 2019, and then over the last few years, we still do not have budgetary allocations for rehabilitation of inmates, the implication of that is there will be a higher rate of recidivism. And what that means is the system will begin to churn in more criminal elements, so which means the person who goes into the correctional facility is bound to come out perhaps even worse off than he entered. So that calls for serious reflection. And I hope we were able to cascade these issues. I do not know if we have representatives of the legislative arm of government, because it's important that they also take this on board in ensuring that the next budgetary cycle captures these identified gaps. So when you find out that police investigators lack forensic tools, or when an indigent defendant is unable to access legal aid, the problem is not administrative. Recall that the Constitution provides for several fundamental rights, and they are tied to these core duties of the criminal justice chain. So essentially, in criminal justice, rights are not self-executing, and therefore underfunding translates to rights violation. So when the system is unable to ensure that individuals are able to access timely trial or speedy dispensation of justice, it's a fundamental rights violation. So these sessions focus funding as it affects the judiciary. Is a study, or it's a presentation which will focus on how financial arrangements shape the rule of law in practice. The emerging consensus from case law, policy, and practice is that when the judiciary has to depend on another arm of government for its operational life, I think that puts the judiciary in a very vulnerable state. And what makes it even worse is when you have issues of liberty at stake combined with it. So it's magnified when the judiciary is largely dependent on the goodwill of the executive for its funding. There's been a lot of clamor for judicial autonomy, and I would like to emphasize that when the conversations are ongoing for judicial financial autonomy, it's not a call for lack of accountability. Well, when the judiciary is dependent, I'm sure it will also strengthen its ability to discharge its duties without fear or favor. So adequate funding of the criminal justice system is therefore not a luxury. It is a constitutional necessity that upholds judicial independence, enhances accountability, and sustains public confidence in the justice system. It's against this backdrop that I have come up with 4 interlinked strands on this present discussion. And the first situates the funding within the constitutional and institutional framework within the criminal justice system, with particular attention to how financial autonomy and interinstitutional coordination affects performance and justice delivery. The second is interrogating the dimensions of quantifying the justice budget, so the quantum, the composition, so what actually comes in. Do we really know what actually comes in, and what gaps exist? The third strand would be to examine the tangible impacts of funding levels of the administration of criminal justice, with particular reference to the FCT and beyond. And this entails the courts, the prosecuting authorities, the correctional centers, the legal aid, and highlighting concrete consequences for fairness, efficiency, and access to justice. And then last strand would be canvassing practical pathways towards smarter budgeting and sustainable financing, which includes the deployment of financial autonomy, reform of budgeting processes, and innovative funding models. We do not need to be told that the criminal justice system is currently underfunded, and a nation may not be able to develop beyond its justice system. You can actually tell how well a nation is faring compared to how the justice system is thriving. So we must approach this discourse with clarity, as funding is one of the principal conditions for independence, effectiveness, and integrity of the criminal justice system. So holistically, the criminal justice system rests on multiple pillars, from the courts, from the prosecuting authorities, Nigerian Correctional Service, legal aid. However, the ground norm of Nigeria, being the 1999 Constitution, vests judicial powers in the courts. And by that, they are to guarantee fair hearing and crucially provides for financial autonomy of the judiciary through the Consolidated Revenue Fund at the federal level and similar arrangements at the state level. Yet, the lived reality, as we all know, often falls short of this constitutional ideal. For the FCT, specifically the High Courts and other courts servicing the Capital Territory, they are funded usually through federal budgetary process and the FCT administration. So this hybrid position even makes it more complex, for the FCT judiciary, because its jurisdiction mirrors that of a state high court, but its funding is embedded within the broader federal fiscal framework, and where you have larger competing national priorities. Overlaying this constitutional framework, we have several statutory provisions, such as the Administration of Criminal Justice Act and the corresponding ACJL laws. We have the Nigerian Correctional Service Act, the Police Act, the Legal Aid Act, even the Annual Appropriation Act, and various policy directives that are intended to promote financial autonomy within the judiciary. So when we speak of quantifying the criminal justice budget, we must interrogate at least 4 dimensions. The overall quantum, the first is the overall quantum allocated to the justice sector relative to national and state budget. The second would be the composition of that allocation, the recurrent versus capital, personnel versus operations, because what we usually find that sometimes you may find out that a budget, an organization or an institution of government appears to have a large sum budgeted to it, but most often than not, sometimes the the personnel cost, actually takes up the capital expenditure. So you find out that there's very little left for the institution to work with. And then the third would be the timing and reliability of releases, cash backing, environment, late releases, and under releases. The previous speaker also mentioned how we know how sometimes these delays come in. She mentioned that as at June, the budget for the Nigerian Correction Service was not released, and I do not think that was just a situation that was peculiar to the NCOS. So I think there is a need for us to perhaps advocate for timing of releases of budget. And then the last dimension will be the cross-institutional balance. So how much goes to the courts, prosecution, corrections, legal aid, police, and other justice sector-related services, and how coordinated these allocations are. Because let's bear in mind that when the investigators are not able to get it right, it becomes a problem for the prosecution, and then the court is also faced with adjudicating over a matter that it has, very weak evidence before it, and then so there is this effect, underlying effect of what happens to one institution has a way of affecting other interrelated institutions within the criminal justice system. So the challenge in Nigeria is not only that the absolute quantum allocated to justice is modest compared to the scale of need. It is also that recurrent expenditure, especially personnel costs, consumes the bulk of allocations, leaving minimal resources for infrastructure, technology, training, and innovation. Capital budgets are frequently under-released or released very late within the fiscal year, therefore undermining planning and reform. Furthermore, sectoral allocations are often made in silos, which are most times insufficient and affecting the interdependence of institutions. A well-funded police force without adequate courts, or a reasonably funded judiciary without prosecutors, of correctional facilities and legal aid yields no effective justice. The criminal justice system is only as strong as its weakest link. So what's the impact of funding across the criminal justice system? The impact is enormous. Like I mentioned earlier during the goodwill message, I mentioned that the Honorable Chief Judge is the chairman of the administration of Criminal Justice Monitoring Committee, and that committee has several statutory duties. And amongst those duties, we have the duty to ensure that the criminal justice system is efficient and effective across Nigeria. So that means that there's a whole lot of responsibility vested on the ACJMC. However, faced with also the discourse we're having here, faced with challenges. Well, I'll just take us through the impact of funding on the criminal justice system. So I examined the prosecution and law enforcement. So when the prosecutors and police investigators operate or have to operate without adequate office accommodation, basic work tools, witness support fund to secure the attendance of witnesses in relation to forensic evidence. The result of this is that there will be a high incidence of poorly investigated cases, serial adjournments due to absent witnesses, and a reliance on confessional statements rather than robust forensic and documentary evidence. The courts may then be placed in a difficult position of choosing between acquittals that may undermine deterrence and convictions based on very thin evidence that may compromise fairness. Taking it down to the correctional service, when you have chronic overcrowding, almost all the correctional facilities in Nigeria are operating at an overly crowded state, housing more inmates than its capacity. that the facility can accommodate. So when you have overcrowding with a high level of, with a high proportion of inmates being awaiting trial, or logistics challenges resulting to inmates not being able to be brought to court, or poor access to rehabilitation or skills, vocational training, which are essential to reducing recidivism, it also has a way of impacting on the functionality of the court, because the court docket will be overcrowded, and then it also clogs the wheel of justice. So ACJA and other complementary laws envisage a modern, humane correctional system that supports decongestion, societal integration, and without appropriate resources, these statutory aspirations cannot be realized. Taking it further to the legal aid, which is also a constitutional requirement for legal representation. And we all know that the legal aid do not have enough staff, the defense counsel, who can actually provide these services. And so for the indigent defendants, the absence of timely and perhaps competent legal representation can undermine or determine the outcome of a criminal case. So funding of legal aid is therefore not charity. It is an integral part of constitutional compliance. So navigating change, bearing in mind the theme of this conference. Okay, so I've just been asked to speak for 1 more minute, so maybe I'll just skip that and go to possible towards innovative and sustainable financing models. So financial autonomy must never be misconstrued as freedom from accountability. It is rather a precondition for responsible and responsive management of judicial resources. Given fiscal constraints, we must be realistic. The justice sector will not suddenly receive a disproportionate share of public funds. We must therefore think creatively within the bounds of the law and ethics. So in closing, I would like to say that funding justice is not a favor to the institutions. It is an investment in social order, economic growth, and national cohesion. The cost of an underfunded criminal justice system will certainly manifest in insecurity, impunity, arbitrary detention, and loss of investment, which is far greater than the cost of adequate funding. I'll leave Moss with these very few words as I close, that I emphasize that the task before us is clear. First, to quantify what it truly costs to deliver timely, fair, and effective criminal justice in Nigeria. Secondly, to align our budgetary processes and legal frameworks with that reality. Thirdly, to ensure that resources, once allocated, are assessed and utilized in a transparent, accountable, and impactful manner. And lastly, to recognize that adequate and properly managed funding, or without adequate and properly managed funding, the lofty guarantees of our Constitution risk becoming hollow promises. On our part, we remain committed to prudent stewardship of resources, continuous reform, and constructive engagement with all stakeholders towards strengthening the administration of criminal justice. If we are serious about the rule of law, then we must be serious about funding justice. The budget is, in this sense, a moral document. It reveals more than our speeches what we truly value. Thank you for your attention.
Resounding applause. Thank you so much. Before we proceed to our next discussant, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Emeka Obegolu, SAN. A round of applause for him. We also have Mr. Abdullahi Yaya, SAN, and Mr. CAS Oshomogbe, SAN. You are welcome. Our next discussant is a representative of budget. He'll be speaking to us for 5 minutes. A resounding applause for him as he makes his way.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me stand on the already existing protocol. I'm here to represent my boss, the Deputy Country Director for Budget Foundation, Mr. Viola Kwaga, but I am by name Andrew Orlando Owahina, the Stakeholder Manager. We are to do we are to present on the biggest transparency and accountability challenges in criminal justice budgeting. Because of time, let me just go through some of what was written down. But after this event, we will provide a detailed detailed draft to the committee so that they can also, have and also share to those who wish to have a copy of the presentation. The effectiveness of any criminal justice system, whether in policing, prosecution, courts, or correctional service, depends heavily on how it is funded, how clearly the funds are accounted for, and how transparently they are managed. Without transparency, the system becomes weak. So also, without accountability, funds fail to translate into justice. Before we even go into the issue of the challenges, let me first of all identify some important topic that is critical to this topic. A transparent and accountable budget ensures that a proper staffing of courts and correctional facilities, timely investigation and prosecution, reduction in case backlogs, better working conditions for justice sector personnel, improve access to justice for citizens, and also reduces how many people stay in jail before their trial, and helps stop overcrowding as well in the various prisons. Now, to look at the challenges, there's what we call opaque and non-detailed budgets. Many justice sector budgets are presented under headings like general services, overhead, and administration. And it is very important because we cannot know what specific activities the money is meant for. It hides inefficiency and corruption. Citizens oversight bodies cannot track, cannot track how money is spent. And that brings me to the issue of we have a platform in budget we call govspend.ng, where every spending of government, if you go to the website, you see it. We have an understanding with the Office of the Academy General of the Federation, where we help simplify that information so that citizens can be aware of how government spends money. In January of this year, the website has been down. Open Treasury portal has been down. And when you try to have a conversation with the Office of the OAGF, they tell you that they're working on it. And from there till now, we are still where we are. That portal helps us to report information that the public ought to be aware of. Every spending made by government, you can see it in that portal. But as it stands right now, it's a challenge. Another one is a detailed, delayed or incomplete release of funds. Funds are released. Funds are partially released. Again, some of these things are things we see as challenges. Even when budgets are approved, the money is often not released regularly or on time. In some cases, only a portion of the approved budget is eventually released. And this creates a whole lot of problems. Like agencies cannot plan properly, operations are disrupted, emergency spending becomes an excuse for shortcuts and corruption, important activities like transporting inmates, running court sections, or maintaining facilities are affected. Another issue we also look at is the poor financial reporting and audit system. Okay, let me just list them because of time. We also have weak procurement practice because we know how important procurement is to every system. Procurement is one of the high-risk areas for corruption. Contracts for building courts, renovating prisons, or supply vehicles and equipment may be inflated or awarded without competition. That's for weak procurement practice. We also have limited overheads, limited oversight by by legislature and the public. As I use the example of GovSpend, you also need the legislative arm to do more oversight on some of these issues. But effective oversight requires access to data and public engagement. However, many legislative bodies may lack the specialized skills to analyze justice sector's budgets. Civil society and the media also struggle to obtain detailed financial information. Limited oversight allows inefficiencies and questionable spending to go unchecked. We also have the political interference in allocation resources, where budget decisions are sometimes driven by political interests instead of data and justice needs. Funds may go to more politically visible units, while critical areas like legal aids or case management system remains underfunded. We also have the issue of the weak internal control and capacity gaps. There's also the weak and poorly implemented monitoring and evaluation system, poor link between federal and subnational justice budgeting, which is quite key because the criminal justice process, where the right to appeal is exercised in full, can stretch from magistrate courts, which is at the subnational level, to the high court at the still at subnational level as well too, to the Court of Appeal, to the Supreme Court, national. However, it isn't clear if these various levels of government carry out joint budgeting and scenario planning for their various fiscal year. Where this can be done with some level of collaboration, it could create efficiency and effectiveness never seen before. In conclusion, or in summary, the biggest transparency and accountability challenges in criminal justice budgeting include opaque budget structure, delayed fund release, weak reporting system, fragmented budgeting, poor procurement practice, and inadequate oversight. These challenges collectively weaken justice delivery, slow case processing, undermine public trust, and prevent institutions from achieving meaningful results. Improving transparency and accountability is not just a financial issue. It is essential for justice, fairness, and the protection of citizens' rights. Strengthening budget clarity, ensuring time releases, enhancing oversight, and adopting performance-based budgeting will greatly improve the effectiveness of the criminal justice system. Thank you very much.
Very kindly, forgive me beforehand for what I am going to say next. I beg you, forgive me beforehand. And it is this. We have billions of dollars abroad, hundreds of billions of dollars abroad. We must find a way of appealing to Nigerians who have these monies abroad to bring it in. Do you agree? Even if it is to say unconditionally, bring back the monies you have abroad. Secondly, we must appeal to Nigerians who have monies within the nation to invest it. Put it in the banks. What is happening right now is Nigerians are purchasing the dollar and keeping it in their houses. Am I right? Yeah. It's true. It's called currency. In other words, it should move, but it's not moving. Well, we are purchasing the dollar and keeping it under our beds. It is a rule of fighting corruption that if the method you want to use will destroy the institution, you should allow the corruption to thrive. I'm not the one saying it. When you go to hospital, they ask you, are you allergic to quinine? If you say you are, they don't give you quinine. It's a rule of fighting corruption. If the method you want to apply will kill the establishment, don't apply it. Let the corruption thrive in the hope that eventually it will heal itself. A wise nation must know how to use corruption to move forward. Do you agree with me? Please. I'm not the one saying it. The nations that we idolize, they were feudal nations, then they engaged in slavery, then colonialism. That's how those nations were built. So I beg the EFCC, I beg the ICPC, I beg the NFIU, I beg the police, I beg the SSS, find a way of encouraging Nigerians who have monies abroad to bring it in. If those monies are safe in those nations, they are better off serving us here. The difference between Nigeria as a corrupt nation and the other nations of the world is that those people who acquired monies in those nations invested those monies in those nations. They didn't carry them out. I beg you, do you agree with me? Yeah. Nigerians who have money, may the president, Jeremy, you have a foundation. Let your foundation begin to preach the gospel of those who have monies, bringing it in. Don't brand it as corrupt money. Don't call them corrupt. Give them national honors. Don't we need the money? Don't we? We need the money. Please. Please. We must encourage Nigerians to invest in the nation. And we must avoid those policies and programs that are discouraging investment in the country. Thank you very much. Please. I hear that there are questions to be answered. Please come forward. Take the mic to those who have questions and give the mic to Jeremy. He can answer them.
Okay, so I'll pass the mic around.
All right, thank you.
And for our viewers at Kogi Viewing Center and those watching online, you can send in your questions by show of hand. Technical units, please assist us here.
Good afternoon, learned Sikhs. All protocol duly observed. My name is Betty Amarachi Umebulem from FCT Administration. My question is this. In 2015, when the Administration of Criminal Justice System Act came out, there were so many applauded innovations. But to my greatest chagrin, up till now, none of no section of that act has been fully or even halfly implemented. Why? Does it mean there's no budgetary provision for the implementation? And what would this foundation do in ensuring that that act is implemented? Thank you.
JB will answer, but I want our brother here to please address us on these issues. He is very, very familiar with these matters.
Yes.
God bless you.
Thank you, sir. I don't know whether you allow me to stay here or okay, sir. Now, just some little contributions from various speakers, particularly from the key speaker and the discussants. First, our leader, Chief Agabe, spoke about opening our borders, corruption. That's the issue. One of the issues. Why are we posing as the big brother of Africa when here we have not even met our own? Last time they said some of our African countries were owing us money for electricity bill, for supplying them power, about $8 million US. When we have not even been able to satisfy ourselves here, band A to band B, they are giving us problem. And you are serving other African, West African coasts. We have not reached that position. We claim we are lions, a giant of West Africa and Africa, whereas inwardly, we are bleeding. Why should we allow the border because, we have international treaties because of brotherliness? My father had a saying. He said, when you are too benevolent that it will injure your own self-preservation, he said you should watch it. So if we now insist that, we must do this because of all this commission, I agree, sir, that we must look forward. That's number one. Number two, we have this issue from all the speakers. What does it take to implement? You have approval. Between approval and implementation and release, there's a problem. Months will be going, things are not done. Is there no way of facilitating all these measures? Because this issue is not just starting today. Every previous successive government is a problem. Budget will be, you pass the budget, the implementation is a problem. To release fund is a problem. And then releasing fund, you will find the bottlenecks. We must address this issue if we are to make progress. Otherwise, we will still be coming here in the next years to come. I'm not a prophet of doom, but that's what it's going to be. And then we'll come over, we'll say the same problem, we weep over it, and we go back, there's no solution. So we must look at it to that. And finally, our leader spoke about bringing funds. Yes, sir. For some of us who have done some of those criminal matters, I remember when advanced fee fraud started, the first EFCC Act. And many of us who were in some of those cases. When it comes to some of those who invested in this country, in the course of plea bargaining, one of the issues we raised was that, look, why are you troubling these people? They built so filling stations, they built so and so. This money they got from all this area, they put it here. So why can't you make it a little bit softer? Because they are like those who took the money to Brazil or US. So I agree, sir, that our agencies should have a look at some of these issues, because it's when you over tighten the rope, then you are now making it fair to be too much on us. I'm not encouraging that we should be, glorifying corruption. No, if there is a way that we look inward without really over-stigmatizing, then we have the benefit. See, these are some of the few comments. I'm sorry to have to take your time. Thank you, sir.
Next question. Give the great Alexander a hand, please. Yes.
All protocol duly observed. My name is Haruna. Sir, during the speech of the Minister of Interior, he told this gathering that the number of the inmates they are having in the Correctional Services Center is about 81,000 plus. And out of this 81,000 plus, many, about 66% of the inmates are there on awaiting trial. So many people or many inmates who are detained were there on either minor offenses, issues that can easily be resolved either by the magistrate or the police. The next thing they file FIR, then the magistrate remand. What would this foundation do to help in checkmating the excessive use of remand and the Nigerian police force? Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, all protocol duly observed. Sorry, my name is Benga Makonjola. I just have a little comment on this issue of budget. And from experience as a former legislator, when you budget, the problem we've been facing for years is that there is something they call an envelope. When national assemblies are making budget, I don't know the status now, but now that we are discussing the issue of implementation, that's why the problem, starts from. What's an envelope? You are given a figure allocated that for MDAs, that's ministry, departments, and agencies. Okay, for MDA B, you are having 20 billion. Then you now go back to your ministry to do internal allocation. When you do internal allocation, so there is possibility that the head of the agency, the directors, will use their position to prioritize what they feel is most interest to them, rather than what the system needs. And as a result of that, it translates to implementation issue. So for me, I think maybe for next conference like this, like one of the guests mentioned earlier on, it's also good that we invite our colleagues in the National Assembly to also be part of this. And when you allocate those figures to certain items, when they want to make release, the person in charge of releases will also prioritize. They will tell you, okay, which item should I release money for? And so, and the critical area where those funds are needed for system to work, even in the administration of criminal justice, have been delayed because what you think should be paramount to some for the releases, some are looking at aspect of infrastructure. Okay, no, we need to build more rooms. We need to buy papers. Meanwhile, you need money to service vehicles that will take prosecutors around, for them that will take police around. Police will tell you during the investigation that, well, we cannot travel to a particular location because we don't have vehicles or we cannot even fuel it. Meanwhile, there are monies for contingency and all that, but those monies have been wrongly prioritized for certain and selfish interests. So I think we need to look into this. But for us to be able to grasp this issue very well, we have to ensure that our colleagues in the National Assembly are seated here next time so that we can put it to them so that the needful can be done. So to me, these are one of the challenges where we are having implementation, especially in the area of criminal justice system. Thank you very much.
Any more questions from our online delegates from the Kogi Viewing Center? Medical. Media team. I'm also informed that questions directed to the coordinator of the Rule of Law Foundation will be answered tomorrow at the morning session. Any comments? Okay.
Kogi Center, can you hear us?
Just cut them off. JB, I'm told that you are going to answer some of the questions tomorrow. Okay. But are you ready now? Okay, so go ahead.
Distinguished participants, the question was, why is the ACJA not working? And Betty observed that since 2015, no provision has been fully implemented. Well, that may not be working as fast as one expects, but that's what we use in courts. That's what we use to apply for, initiate charges, apply for bail, get warrants of arrest, and do quite a number of things. So to the extent that trials are going on, statements are taken, and you can see why it's working, is that even the Supreme Court has ruled on so many sections Now, confessional statements have to be video recorded. If not, it will end up being set aside or being voided. So I think it's step by step. The areas where it may not be receiving too much attention, which is in courts I don't go to, maybe the magistrate courts, they will be in the best position to say so. But so far, so good. I think everybody's applying it uniformly. And it needs time for people to get used to it. So that just be my answer to her question. The other issues are for the budget experts. And so if there's any question that was raised, but most of it were comments. So I think I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, sir.
JB, with that, let me thank you for the privilege of chairing this session. Let me thank the discussants for their contributions. Let me thank all of you for your patience. May the Lord bless you. Thank you very much indeed.
That brings us to the end of today's program. For the closing prayer, I'd like to call on my noble Lord, Honorable Justice M.A. Oredola, JCA. A round of applause for him.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا أكرمنا ولا تهنا وزدنا ولا تنقصنا وارفعنا ولا تدعنا واتنا ولا تحرمنا وارض عنا ولا تكذب علينا واسرنا ولا تؤثر علينا وكن لنا ولا تكن علينا وانصرنا ولا تنصر علينا واجرنا من خزي الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة ربنا لا تدع فينا خائفا إلا آمنته ولا مدينا إلا قضيت دينه ولا سائلا إلا آتيته ولا غائبا سافرا إلا إلى أهله سالما غانما راشدا رددا الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.